Welcome to How to Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yugioh Progress 2025.
Chapter 1.
Okay, so in this video, I'm going to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! This year and the progress that I feel the game has made and what Konami has done and addressed the issues that I think we as players have had. And it's something I want to say because on this channel, I really just want to talk about the good things that has happened to the game and the improvements. Because it's very easy to just complain, very easy to just enter that negative headspace without realizing that a lot of things have been done by Konami for Yu-Gi-Oh! And so yeah, so let's cover them in this video.
Chapter 2.
Okay, and so we're gonna cover some things that us as players have been talking about, and I think I've mentioned this before on this channel, if you're a regular on this channel, that we've seen big improvements from Yu-Gi-Oh! Starting from 2023. And I think the common issues I think we have been talking about as of late is the hand traps, pricing, and power creep. I think these are the three major points that we've had issue with. I think the majority of the player base, the community, has issues with these things, and we've wanted these things to be addressed. Pricing has been addressed somewhat to a certain degree with the rarity collection, definitely, and it's been addressed quite heavily this year. We'll definitely talk about that. Hand traps again, I think, has been fully addressed this year and is continuously being addressed, and power creep. So let's go to the next to one of these points to explain how they're being addressed.
Chapter 3.
Okay, and now I'm going to talk about the hand traps. In front of you, you can see the four Dominus cards. Dominus Spiral, as you can see in front of you, is the latest Dominus that will come near the end of the year. First, let's read this Dominus as you see them. First, let's read the Dominus card known as Dominus Spiral. So Dominus Spiral has this effect. If your opponent activated a monster effect in the hand or graveyard at this turn, you can activate this card from your hand. Target one monster your opponent controls, return to the hand/extra deck. Then if you have no traps in your graveyard, your opponent can special summon one monster from their graveyard. If you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of light and dark monsters for the rest of this duel. You can only activate one Dominus Spiral per turn. Okay, let's go to the next Dominus card, which is Dominus Impulse. Dominus Impulse has the following effect. If your opponent controls a card and you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. If you activate this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of light, earth, and wind monsters for the rest of this duel. You can only activate one Dominus Impulse per turn. Indeed, let's go to the next Dominus card, which is Dominus Purge. Dominus Purge has this effect. If your opponent controls a card, you can activate this card from your hand. When a card or effect is activated, it includes an effect that adds a card from the deck to the hand, negate that effect. Then, if you have a trap card in your graveyard, destroy that card. If you've activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effect of dark, water, and fire monsters for the rest of this duel. You can only activate one Dominus Purge per turn. And finally, the last Dominator card called Songs of the Dominators with this effect. If you have no monsters in your graveyard, you can activate this card from your hand. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap card in your graveyard, you can add one Dominus card from your deck to your hand. If you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of monster effects in your hand, graveyard, and banishment until the end of the next turn. You can only activate one Songs of the Dominators per turn. And so, indeed, when we look at these Dominator cards, how you may ask the question, right? How does this address, right, the hand trap situation in Yu-Gi-Oh? To understand how this addresses the hand trap situation, first let's look at how hand traps are in Yu-Gi-Oh now. I think I've talked about this before in a previous video, but we used to only play 9, I think a maximum of 9 hand traps, right? When hand traps were early introduced, before spirals came out. And so, why was it that after when spirals came out, our hand trap lineup and in most meta decks jumped up to 12 and then standardized at 15? Right? What was the jump and what caused this sudden increase? Well, when Spirals were out, Spirals was a very strong deck. And at the time, we had to play a lot of hand traps to compensate. And it seems ever since that point, we've always been playing a maximum of 15 hand traps. Sure, it's gone down to 12, but generally, most meta decks, became standardized and normalized to play 15 hand traps. And at one point, we went to 20 hand traps with Tempai. So what do Dominus cards have to do with decreasing our hand trap count? First of all, when you see the Dominus cards, since we only had two Dominus cards that we could use at the time, I think Songs of the Dominators potentially doesn't count. That was before Dominus Spiral was announced. The Dominus cards didn't really have an impact. But now, near the end of the year, we have Dominus Spiral, and all of a sudden, the hand trap situation changes a bit more. Say, for example, we have a deck like Fire King, right? That's an attribute of fire. This is a deck that can now potentially play Dominus Impulse and Dominus Spiral. So it can play 3 Dominus Impulse, 3 Dominus Spiral. And then when you add 3 Imperm, all of a sudden, this is a deck that just has got 9 hand traps. And you might think, could they put a bit more? They can't. Because of Dominus Impulse, if they want to fully use it from the hand, they can't use Light, Earth, and Wind effects for the rest of the duel. This means that Nibiru is locked out, the ghost hand traps are locked out, and Droll is locked out as well. And because they're playing Spiral as well, you can't play Droll, the DDD Crow, no dark hand traps can be played. And with that, we can see a huge reduction in hand trap usage just by facilitating multiple Dominus cards. And here we see the real way Konami has introduced of dealing with loads of hand traps. Now, let's say we have a potential future where we don't play another archetype that can play maybe Dominus, Purge, and Spiral, and you see these things you can do there. And the more Dominus cards that gets released, potentially we'll have a Dominus card that will have the locking attributes of fire and water, and expect one for earth and wind. The point that I'm trying to make here is that there's loads of utility and loads of things that can be done to lessen hand traps now in the game, and is something that needs to be considered, especially for decks going forward for players. Because Impulse is a strong card. Being able to play Solemn Warning from your hand, and as well a compulsory evacuation device from your hand for free, is actually really good. Sure, you'd lose access to loads of hand traps, but being able to have these access of those cards for the rest of the game is alright. And I think this is a fantastic way to deal with hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! As we get more Dominus cards than the maximum that we would see decks play, possibly going into 2026, is, just a version of maybe 9 hand traps max. Because we would only see, like, the Dominus card that you would need, the secondary Dominus card that you could play, and then infinite impermanence. Putting it at 9 hand traps. And I think that's okay. So yeah, let's cover another example of how Konami is dealing with the hand trap situation.
Chapter 4.
Alrighty then, so let's talk about the Hecaton Care archetype that premieres in the Doom Dimension booster set later on this year. Now, you look at this archetype and you're wondering, Silver Burns, what do you mean by this? What do you mean by an archetype that deals with the hand trap situation in Yu-Gi-Oh? What I want to introduce you to is a concept that I think we've had before with bestials. Let me allow me to explain it this way. Bestials is an archetype that was being released a few years back. And bestials, I think, is the best example of how we deal with hand traps. Not necessarily by making an archetype that's fully hand traps. Allow me to explain. Ever since bestials have been in the game, they have infiltrated loads of decks. This also means that bestial decks, when they're played, these are the decks that are the most fair in Yu-Gi-Oh! As they do not play loads of hand traps. For example, bestial, a bestial Regenesis or bestial Kashtira or bestial etc, bestial whatever, can't play loads of hand traps. This also means that they're limited. They cannot. So if you play bestials, you can't all of a sudden play bestials and then loads of hand traps or whatever, because the bestial package is quite big in itself. This is what I like about bestials, but this again is another fantastic way Konami has of having hand traps, but also reducing the hand trap count. So let's say, for example, we have these Hecaton Cares archetype. Let's read these Hecaton Care monsters, and you can see where I'm going with this. So we have Hecaton Care Breus. It has this effect. If this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. You can only use each of the following effects of Hecaton Care Breus once per turn. If a card or cards is added to your opponent's hand, except during the draw phase, you can special summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can look at one random card in your opponent's hand, and if it is a monster, you can special summon it to your field. Okay? Let's look at this as a summoning condition. First of all, I like this card as a hand trap. Think about this card. Is it a quick effect? It potentially could. It's not a quick effect, right? But looking at it, I think this is perfectly fine. The condition of being able to special summon itself if your opponent adds a card, I think is something that, with the way Konami is making cards, have realized that they're making decks extra consistent. This is a card that is able to rip a card from your opponent's hand. However, it's basically a 1-for-1. They add a card and then you rip one, as it can only activate when they've successfully ripped a card. Having an activation condition very similar to Kashtira, as the effect has to be resolved. They successfully have to have added a card. Let's go to the next Hecaton Care card, which is Hecaton Care Goddess. We have that clause again. If this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. You can only use each of the following effects of Hecaton Care Goddess once per turn. If a card is added to your opponent's hand, except during the draw phase, you can special summon this card from your hand. During your opponent's main phase, quick effect, you can target one monster in your opponent's graveyard, special summon it to your field, but banish it when it leaves the field. So we can see that Goddess is a quick effect, as we can use this on our turn, on your opponent's turn. This is a great disruption, as this means that they add a card, you can grab a monster from their graveyard, and you can do loads of things there. Great card. I like this concept. Is fantastic, as this is a concept, again, as you can see with these two Hecaton Care cards, that they function when your opponent is adding cards and just doing their combo. This doesn't disrupt the opponent. I want to make something very clear. Bestials and this Hecaton Care archetype do not disrupt the opponent. They do not say your opponent cannot play, but they're able to just interfere with your opponent. Again, nice concept. Let's go to the next Hecaton Care monster, Hecaton Care Gigas. Hecaton Care Gigas If this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. We know the familiar clause. You can only use each of the following effects of Hecaton Care Gigas once per turn. If a card or cards is added to your opponent's hand, except during the draw phase, you can special summon this card from your hand. During your main phase, you can activate the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. You can special summon one excavated monster. Also shuffle the rest into the deck. Great card, fantastic card. Let's go to the next Hecaton Care monster, which is Hecaton Care Yaddle. Or Yaddle? Yaddle. I'll call it Yaddle. Hecaton Care Yaddle. We have that clause again. I'm not going to read it. But then we'll say once per turn you can reveal this card in your hand, shuffle it into the deck, and then add one Hecaton Care spell or / trap from your deck to your hand. And then if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can target one Hecaton Care spell or trap in your graveyard and set it. And finally, we have the final monster. This is Hecaton Care Ebel. If this, so you see that clause there, I'll read it again. And so we have once per turn, you can reveal this card in your hand, shuffle it into the deck, then special summon one Hecaton Care monster from your deck in defense position, except Hecaton Care Ebel. This card is sent to the graveyard, target one Hecaton Care monster in your graveyard, except Hecaton Care Ebel, and special summon it. Finally, we have the extra deck monsters, which is Hecaton Care Xeno. Hecaton Care Xeno is materials of 3 Hecaton Care monsters. If this card battles an opponent's monster, neither can be destroyed by battle, as you know with all the illusions, yada yada yada. And so we have once per turn during the main phase, quick effect, you can look at 2 random face down cards in your opponent's extra deck, and if you do, special summon one of them to your field. If this feature summon card is in its owner's control is destroyed by opponent's card effect, you can take control of any number of monsters they control. And finally, the other card we have, final monster, Hecaton Care Jauza. Hecaton Care Jauza must first be either fusion summoned or special summoned from your extra deck by tributing one illusion monster and one face-up monster you control owned by your opponent. During your main phase, you can add one Hecaton Care card from your deck or graveyard to your hand. You can only use each effect of Hecaton Care Jauza once per turn. This card battles an opponent's monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. Anyways, when I look at these Hecaton Care monsters, I like this archetype. I like this as an engine, and when I think of a potential future that everyone is using this as an engine and every deck is playing it, and I'm like, that's a future I'm willing to look at. Not only does playing Hecaton Cares stop, will not allow a player to have a lot of hand traps, as it's a huge engine in itself, it's a great way of reducing the hand trap usage for Yu-Gi-Oh going forward. And I think this archetype like hand trap thing, I think is a fantastic way of Konami reducing hand trap usage in Yu-Gi-Oh, and I definitely think is a fantastic idea and a really great step forward of implementing this. So yeah, I think these ideas and similar ideas like this, along with the Dominus cards, are tangible ways that Konami is showcasing to us how they're dealing with the hand trap problem. And I think in 2026 is where we should see a real difference in the hand trap lineup, and I think we'll really see whether these drastic changes from Konami, whether they've paid off in the game. So let's look forward to that.
Chapter 5.
Okay, and now I'm gonna talk about power creep in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's right. I think this is something we've been talking about as a community for a while now. That power creep is getting absolutely ridiculous. We've been saying for a long time now, let's get the power level down. Let's make the game slower. So let's have a very real, tangible example of how power creep has actually been brought down this year. In front of you, you can see 3 archetypes that were the best last year: Snake Eyes, Fiendsmith, and Yubel. These archetypes were absolutely insane. And I'm sure as players we remember these archetypes. Snake Eye with its potential board that was absolute nonsense. Fiendsmith and Yubel. And obviously, last year they were hit. All these archetypes were hit. I think Fiendsmith wasn't hit, but whatever it is. I think, yeah, Lacrima was hit. They were all hit in some shape or form, in some capacity. Now, when we come to this year, if we go to the next slide, these are the three archetypes that are going to be coming soon, which is K9, Dracotail, and Yami. I think every single Yu-Gi-Oh, every single player in the community is in full agreement that full power Snake Eye, full power Fiendsmith, and full power Yubel completely crushes these three archetypes that are coming out soon, in I think the next month or so. And this definitely has, for the first time ever, showcased to us that Konami has now dealt with power creep. And I hope this is a sign of change. I hope this is a sign that things are going better and the power level is going down. Sure, is K9 doing some, or potentially going to be doing some nasty things? Yeah, but compared to like Snake Eye at full power, sign me up, please. I'd rather face K9 full power than Snake Eye at full power. That's for sure, and I think a lot of players would basically tell you the same thing. While K9 at full power is, can lock you out, but here's the difference. Snake Eye, you weren't even able to play. They would play on your opponent's turn. I mean, I'm not to say that Dice Smashers and K9 is a healthy way to play the game. As a thought, is never a healthy way. But it was just Snake Eyes at full power is a complete and utter misnomer and just no. So yeah, this is something I think I would like to say. I think Konami has definitely addressed power creep concerns, and I think this is something that we as a community, I think a lot of players haven't realized this, but I think it's obvious by now that every single archetype from last year at full power crushes every single archetype from this year. This has never been the case for Yu-Gi-Oh! It's always been that whenever the next year comes out, the power creep keeps increasing. The current year's archetype are stronger than last year's archetype in a perpetual loop. But for the first time, the cycle has been broken. Even this set itself, with its Justice Hunters this year, right? These are archetypes that have similar power levels to each other, right? So, to a certain degree anyway, which again is unusual, as we've not had this sort of function, sort of set in Yu-Gi-Oh, where the archetypes in the set are of a similar value, especially be similar power level, especially on their initial release, right? And this is we're talking about again, yeah, still. Anyways, so yeah, power creep has been dealt with, and sure, many would say, players would have some anecdotes and say, no, there's this and that and the other. But I would say complete and utter nonsense, right? Whether it's Rise or whatever, I think we can all definitively say any archetype from this year at full power is losing to all archetypes from just the previous year at full power. I think this is completely obvious. And such a stark difference tells me that Konami has put their foot down and is listening, has listened to the community, and is doing something about the power creep situation. And I truly hope that this year is the olive branch that Konami is putting out with these archetypes right now and showcasing to us, okay, here, look, we've reduced the power level of decks now. They are much weaker, and it's an enjoyable time. I think another thing I also want to say, which is very important, is the pricing. Now, this year, I think prices of cards has come down somewhat. Have the sets been good this year? I'm not gonna lie, they've not been the best. But we as a community have been saying for the longest time we want the prices of cards to go down. Haven't we not said this? And Konami has delivered. possibly has not delivered in the best way. Yes, the sets are complete garbage, but it has been listened to. I think we definitely need to work on getting better sets. Not gonna lie, and leaves a lot to be desired. But I like where the game is now because at least, again, since 2023 till now, this is now going 2 years running. Konami is taking active steps to improve the game. We've seen a reduction of price in the game. And Yu-Gi-Oh right now is the cheapest it's ever been, especially for competitive scene. It is absolutely affordable. And I can say this with absolute confidence, right? That I can bring someone to play this game, right? I can tell them to go take out a deck right now. It is not that bad, okay? Sure, Justice Hunters is going to come out, and even Justice Hunters, right? I want to make this perfectly clear. The archetypes in Justice Hunters are considered to be the strongest archetypes for this year. Full power, right? K9 is looking to be around, possibly if we get everything, maybe 500 to 600 what is it, pounds or dollars. If this was in Snake Eye, which was the best, would be at 4 digits. Yes, Snake Eyes last year, I think at full power, adding all the cards that you'd get for it, I think we're definitely hitting 4 digits. Now, am I saying, 5 to 600 is, an affordable price? Absolutely not. But again, I'm looking at it as baby steps, okay? Baby steps. We go from 4 digits to 3 digits. And if we continue on with this conversion rate, next year we should go to 2 digits if it continues on like this. And then the year after we can go to 1 digit, whatever it is. The point is, we need to set goals. I think goals are important. And the cheaper that the meta decks become year after year, I think that'll be an impact. I think if next year, for example, like meta decks, a very strong meta deck is going for 2 digits instead of 3 digits, then I think that'll be a huge impact to the game and Yu-Gi-Oh being affordable. So yeah, that's my honest thoughts for where the game is right now. Let's head on to the conclusion.
Final chapter.
So, here I am at the conclusion. And what I want to say is that Yu-Gi-Oh is in a very good place right now, I would say, personally. Now, is it in now I know a lot of the community, especially the American side, is saying that the game is not in a good place, right? Whatever with the sets. We've had a bad year with sets, we've had a bad year with whatever. But I think what they fail to realize is that we are competing with other card games. And another thing as well is that we already need to leverage our strengths. Our strengths, we need to definitely bring prices down. Okay, if the prices of cards come down, which Konami has been actively doing, then that is a win. That's how we can bring the casuals in. If the power level of the meta decks comes down as well, then you are more likely to play your fun decks. Then it is easier for casuals to come in. Like already right now, right? I have full confidence I can bring a casual person I can bring a newcomer to the game right now, and I have full confidence they will enjoy the game. Because playing against Ryziel is much, much better than playing against Snake Eye at full power. I'm gonna be real with you right now. The power level drop is insane. And even from Ryziel to K9, if we, let's say, were to ban whatever, the power level dynamics of Ryziel with K9 is night and day. Ryziel, at full power, is beating, K9 No questions asked. The only reason why Rizial is now would potentially go down is because it's been hit. So yeah, we are definitely seeing power level reduction here. I want to make one thing clear. Power level reduction is what we're seeing at Yu-Gi-Oh right now, and I absolutely love it. Okay? Our biggest issues, and I think we've said this as a community, we need to bring the power level down. Power creep needs to not be a thing. And Konami is doing this actively. The power of decks has decreased this year. It's obvious to everyone that plays this game. The power level of decks this year is significantly weaker than decks from last year. Another thing as well, the prices of cards has come down massively. Okay, especially if you're a casual player. They've come down massively. It is much cheaper right now to get a competitive deck. It is the cheapest it's ever been. It's still not the best, do not get me wrong, but it is a huge cry from what it was last year. So yeah, the hand trap situation I want to say is going to massively improve. It's not the best right now, don't get me wrong, but compared to last year, it is significantly better. And with the inclusion of the Dominus cards, as I was telling you about in Doom Dimension later on this year, there's going to be significant changes to deck building, especially when it comes to hand traps. The more that people introduce Dominus into their decks, and the more that they play multiple Dominus cards, the hand trap situation is going to see a magnificent shift in a healthier direction. Because the more Dominus cards you play, the less actual hand traps you can play. This is something that's very important, right? The more Dominus cards you play, I repeat, the less actual hand traps you can actually play. The maximum of hand traps you can play if you adopt 2 Dominus cards in your decks is 9 hand traps, maximum. If you were to increase more, then you cannot increase more because the Dominus cards will not allow you to increase more, as it locks other hand traps away from you. And I think that, to me, is how we're dealing. Konami's dealing with hand traps, right? By the Dominus cards existing, it means you can't just slap in loads of hand traps into your decks anymore. You have a high ceiling, you have high risk, and very high reward. But at the same time, your ceiling is higher, but the risk is higher as well, as you cannot play other hand traps. So, for example, in a potential scenario, let's say you were to play Fire King in the next format. You can play Impulse, which is the best Dominus, and Dominus Spire, which is another very good Dominus, but in doing so, you cannot play Nibiru. Your deck cannot play Nibiru, or Ash Blossom, or any of the Ghost Sister cards. You can't play any of the Bestial cards, you can't play any of the DDD Crow cards, you can't play Chaos Hunter, you can't play Monster. So the pool of cards you can play is relatively small. I think the only hand trap you can play at that point is Ash Blossom, right? Because it's Fire in Fire King. So you can only play what? You can only increase your hand trap size to 12, potentially, which is, again, I would say much better than our hand trap situation now, where we're playing 15 or 20. Sign me up for less hand traps in decks, please. And even that Ash Blossom, it can be, yeah, would be mandatory, especially with the Charmies going around. So it also brings about like Mulcharmy inclusion, right? If you are playing these Dominus cards, some of these Dominus cards also conflict with the Charmy cards. So what Charmy cards are you playing, right? If you play Dominus Impulse and Dominus Spiral, can you play Mulcharmy Fiolos, or can you play Mulcharmy for Parelia, right? It's all these questions and more that you can't really play. So these offer a loads of discussions, loads of deck building choices that players will have to figure out. And I think this is part of what I really want to say. I think our hand trap lineup in Yu-Gi-Oh has been very easy. It's been too straightforward, and it's not been without any sacrifice. Hand traps, I think, need to be changed and there needs to be some thought in placing hand traps. I think for the longest time, placing hand traps into your deck this has been extremely easy. It's just been slap in loads of hand traps into your deck. You don't need to think about it. You don't need to know about it. That it is what it is. But I think with the Dominus cards in being introduced in the game and with how powerful they are, especially with Dominus Spiral, it is now legitimate thought to see if you can be playing multiple Dominus cards. And just having the thought in itself, introducing these concepts to players, I think will have a huge impact on our hand trap count for decks going forward. And that's all I've got to say. Tune in next time as I'll talk about more things on this channel. Hope to see you soon.
We come to the end of this video. So, as I like to say, you are one step closer to becoming a Yu-Gi-Oh! Master. My fate, right, is in your hands.